So after a little over 2 months after a 9 week delay occurred, we are finally back with Doomsday Clock by Jeff Johns and artist Gary Frank. When we last left off, Black Adam had basically invaded the United Nations. Everything was going to hell. Superman was in a coma. Batman was investigating. Wonder Woman was ready to fight. The Justice League Odyssey, and the Justice League Dark teams, and the Titans were all incapacitated. The Bat family was incapacitated. The Shazam family was incapacitated. The Flash family was incapacitated. The Doom Patrol were incapacitated. I honestly thought Manhattan killed all of them because really, he has no point keeping them alive for reasons. So yeah, and not a lot of stuff happens in the traditional sense. Like we don't get like what are the characters gonna do now, knowing they got their ass handed to them by a naked blue man within 10 minutes. And how is Superman going to get back up from this? How is the public and the world's on the verge of meta-human warfare, or World War Meta as I call it. However, everything stops but progresses. This is more like a big exposition from Manhattan, and we get that, that meta comic, or in this case, the meta film inside within the story, a story within a story moment regarding the adjournment. I could have pronounced that wrong. Involving focusing on a guy named Carver Coleman, who's an actor playing a character called Nathaniel, or Nate, who's a private eye investigator. Apparently he's struggling with his lines, and it's been like 12 takes, and the actress who plays the woman who tried to kill him is basically reminding the director, no, it's actually 13. Then we get narration from Dr. Manhattan. It's June 8th, 1954. Carver Coleman is on the set of The Adjournment, shooting the final scene. Then he goes on to explain Carver Coleman and how... Yeah, here's the thing. We kept wondering how does he know who Carver Coleman is? And people were curious as to knowing why. But then we hear the story, and we learn why he knows Carver Coleman so much, why he seems to bring him up a lot in issue 7. Dr. Manhattan is kind of narrating his past, from his beginning of life in Hollywood to his rise to superstardom to his untimely demise at the hand of his later revealed to be his mother and her bodyguard. And the perspective shifts around because this is Manhattan. He has a perspective of time. He can see everything at once, but it be in one place. And he's basically being an omniscient narrator in this. And then he quotes the most famous line in all of DC Comics, in fact, of all of comics: worlds live, worlds die. However, he ends it with this: nothing lasts forever. Or does it? And then we cut to Dr. Manhattan standing on the surface of Mars looking at Earth. And then we flash back to him giving Silk Spectre life to breathe on Mars since she was suffocating. And here's the thing. When I was seeing that, I was like, wait, are they reusing the Watchmen artwork from Dave Gibbons? Because it did look like that for a moment. And then we got another moment where I kept thinking Dave Gibbons made these two art pieces, and the rest was Gary Frank. And then he goes ahead and talks about what's going on for the last 10 minutes, and his ending in the final issues of Watchmen. And then we cut back to how this all began. How he's drawn to Superman's worlds for reasons that he did not understand in the moment. And the first person he's planning to speaking to will be Carver Coleman. And it's Christmas Day, 1928. Carver Coleman sits in the Dark Theater in Philadelphia while his mother dances down the street for sweaty men and dimes. And then we get more talk going on. When she brings one of the men home, she decides to go west. And then narrates to later in December that Carver Coleman arrives in Los Angeles with $17 and a clean change of clothes. Then it cuts forward to January 19th, 1929. He's serving as a delivered mail at Paramount Studios for 8 months. And yeah, this is where the time thing gets like get a little jumpy, and people how they don't remember his name. But then as Carver Coleman was leaving, he sees the studio head kissing a man behind the stage. The executive drops his cigarette, and the stage will be burned to the ground in this event. Yeah, remember back then being LGBT was a taboo. You couldn't be that, and if that was known back then, Paramount would have collapsed. In the DC Universe's version. So the studio claims that it was faulty wiring. Yeah, it's actually burned to the ground by accident. Carver Coleman loses his job over it, and I'm not understanding why. Like, they never really pinned it on Carver Coleman. They never really. Yeah, here's the thing. I didn't get that scene. Like, what did Carver Coleman do that gets him fired? Like, over this, like, he didn't really do anything. Like, if Manhattan was saying that the executive had something to do with it, okay, but he just says, "Oh, the executive drops his cigarette. Stage burns. The soundproof stage burns to the ground. He loses his job over it." Moving on. Then Carver Coleman hits his lowest of lows when he's fired from Daytona, when he skips work to wait in line for an audition that never happens. He's evicted on April 18th, 1938. That night, Carver Coleman sleeps on the streets of Los Angeles. 10 to midnight, he is woken by a blue light. And everyone assumes that this is Dr. Manhattan, but no, it turns out to be the cops, and yeah. Yeah, the cops are assholes in this because reasons. So they beat this kid for reasons. And yeah. But then it's April 18th, 1938. Dr. Manhattan arrives. The first thing he hears is Carver Coleman crying out to the man who struck him. The first thing he sees is Carver Coleman checking his pulse. The people on this world are different to him. He wonders if that is why he was drawn there. He's confused for the first time since Adrian blinded him with tachyons. And he tries to pull back the curtain to understand the time dilation between worlds. So yeah, Dr. Manhattan, since he's basically a man out of time, he's the outside looking in. His mind is not caught up to the DC universe, because think about this. He had lived on Watchmen Earth for so long, he's used to it. His mind has adapted to it. But changing your internal vibrational frequency, as it was explained how you could go to different universes in the DC time. And even for someone as him, his mind has to adjust to this. His powers need to adjust, to adapt, to evolve with the realization of being in a different universe, and he can't see, so to speak. He doesn't know the full context of everything. He doesn't know what's going to happen now. He doesn't know what's going to happen in 6 seconds. He doesn't know what's going to happen 38 years ago. Then he cuts himself back to Mars in the same position as he was when he arrived on Earth, on the DC Earth in 1938. And he's confused again, saying he sees himself on Mars, or is that now? And Hal Jordan tries to call out for Guy Gardner and Guy Gardner and John Stewart. And he's calling, and Hal Jordan explains he's going to call for the Corps for backup and summons their lanterns for a recharge. And then Dr. Manhattan stops him, which leads to this question: where's Jessica? Is she dead? Like, nice to bring her into this conversation. I actually watched the Justice League versus Fatal 5. I'm actually interested in her character. And then Dr. Manhattan duplicates himself and restrains the heroes from attacking him, saying this: "I need you all incapacitated for reasons that will become clear." So basically, he's going to tell him his life story, sort of. And I'm just waiting for Barry Allen to do something. Here's the thing: there's two missed opportunities here in this issue that really should have drove the point home of all this. But I'll get to that when I can. He stands for the surface on the surface of Mars waiting for Superman, and then it cuts back to 1943, the first Nathaniel Dust picture is released, and although its controversial content brings criticism, it is Werner Bro's subtle, most successful picture of the year. Nathaniel Dust, private investigator in Nothing to Lose. And it cuts back to 1938 where he's arrived. Then Carver Coleman asks who he is. Dr. Manhattan shocks in this interesting angle. He doesn't call himself Dr. Manhattan because that's who he referred to himself as after everyone gave him that name. And he never really called himself his original name. And as far as I remember, he says, "My name is John." And Carver asks, "Are you an angel?" Then Dr. Manhattan looks at him and then seemingly looks sad when his facial expression changes slightly. He's frowning, his eyes look a little sadder, and he just says no. Then he and Carver Coleman walk together to a local diner, and they go in, and Carver says, "I don't have money," and Dr. Manhattan just says, "You don't need any." And sure enough, the waitress greets them, and Dr. Manhattan says, "Yes, thank you." And here's the thing. Carver Coleman sees Dr. Manhattan for what he is, the naked blue man that with his dongle hanging out. And however, Dr. Manhattan explains that he's shifting the light color frequencies around him. She's seeing what he wants her to see. And what he sees is a normal everyday man. And the waitress asks, "Now what can I get you?" And Carver Coleman says he would like a hot bowl of soup, and she says, "We have some chicken noodle made right here from scratch." Dr. Manhattan just says, "That will be all for now. Thank you." Yeah, what a nice guy, the God being. He's going to bring about the destruction of the DC Universe because he's under the orders of Dan DiDio is going to be so nice about. Yeah, there's some metatextual stuff in this issue because it gets really meta fast later. And the waitress leaves and calls for the chicken noodle soup, and then Dr. Manhattan just sits there staring at the guy and says, "It is April 18th, 1938. I feel like I'm walking through a fog. I tried a simple exercise. To look 3 minutes into the future. I am unable to. I need something to focus on. This man. It's like trying to see through a soap-covered window." He says he doesn't understand. And then it cuts again to saying this. "It is April 18th, 1938. A buzzing fills my ears as I attempt to open my eyes." Then it cuts to April 1 year later. And Carver Coleman is a little different. He's happier. He's wearing more better clothing. And then he says, "You're right, John. I got the part. Right alongside Gary Cooper. Can you believe it? It's called The Westerner. How did you..." And then it cuts back to the present, where he says, "Having a hard time. I thought you were sent from heaven, my guardian angel maybe, but you're not an angel. Are you God?" Dr. Manhattan then says, "My eyes continue to adjust to this universe, and I begin to see the future again. It's April 18th, 1943. And Carver Coleman's older now. It's a hit, John. An absolute smash. They want to make another Nathaniel Dust picture. Alden Peterman is asking for it." Then it cuts to 1952. And it says, "I had to act and Carver Coleman is wearing a tuxedo, saying, "I had to act surprised when they read my name. Best actor, Carver Coleman." Anyway, I have a party to get to, so if you Give me a bit of your insight for what's happening next year. I'll be on my way. And then it cuts to 1954, 2 years later. I won't be on this world 1 year from now? What does that mean, John? It means just that. No, I want details this time. You can't do this to me, damn it! 1955 comes around, and for the first time since 1938, he sits alone. And Carver Coleman is back. Then it returns back to 1938, and Carver Coleman's talking about maybe he should just give up on what he was doing, and then asks for John, and then he says, I can see again. In 8 months, you're going to get cast in a role that will change your life. And Carver's like, what are you talking about? And then Dr. Manhattan hears this moment. Reports out of Metropolis, New York, of a mysterious man who lifted a car over his head. I hope he's on our side. It's a joke, Mel. It's April 18th, 1938. News of Superman travels quickly across America. Dr. Manhattan disappears, leaving Carver to wonder where he went. And what he finds is just the photo of John before his Manhattan transformation and his lovely wife-to-be. He picks up the photo and stares at it. Then we cut to that iconic moment from the first ever Action Comics of the car being smashed into rocks. And the police are investigating, trying to wonder what the hell is going on. And then as this is going on, a woman's talking and said this. Then he leapt over that building way over there. And then we get the guy who was like, say, he had this smile on his face too. And then Dr. Manhattan is standing amongst them, unable to be seen, most likely because if he could be seen, that would be a completely awkward situation. Dr. Manhattan then stands alone. The crowd, the car, Superman, they were never here. It's April 18th, 1938. The world has changed. A theoretical physicist named Bruce DeWitt hypothesized that when I heard that, I was hearing, wait, that sounds like Booker DeWitt. Oh god, are they mixing Bioshock into the universe? So anyways, a theoretical physicist named Bruce DeWitt hypothesized that the universe was constantly splitting into alternate timelines, the many worlds interpretation. It theorized that parallel worlds were endlessly created, flowing out like the branches of a tree. The heroes on Earth call it the multiverse, and this world was at its center. Then we get the moment where Superman's lifting the car. Superman turns and seemingly looks at Manhattan. The world was introduced to Superman on April 18th, 1938. He was the first of the costumed heroes, the first of many on this world. And then I was trying to look into something regarding Superman, regarding when Superman actually made his debut in like the comic public eye. So I went and looked this up in Action Comics. Let's see. He was first released, sure enough, the cover date was June 1938. His published date was April 18th, 1938. Yeah, this is basically a huge homage, love tribute to everything Superman. The past, the present, the future. And as Dr. Manhattan continues talking, he then cuts to July 1940. An engineer named Alan Scott is on the train, carrying over a bridge. He grabs onto a Green Lantern, unaware of the power within. The power within. The power within. The power within! Okay, that didn't happen, but still, I wanted to. In January, a college student named Jay Garrick lies unconscious in a school lab, breathing in heavy water vapors. By morning, he will be the fastest man alive. That same month, archaeologist Carter Hall comes into contact with an ancient knight that awakens his past life as an Egyptian prince. Remembering the warriors he was, Carter will search for not only the weapons he once wielded, but for the love he lost. In October, frustrated by his size, El Pratt begins training under one of the world's greatest fighters. In November, he will sit around a table and feel the need to point that out. In May, A golden helmet of unknown supernatural powers falls into the hands of Kent Nelson. 3 years later, he will learn that the spirit within him sought him out. It's April 1939. Wesley Dodds awakes from a nightmare of a murder on the grounds of the World's Fair. Donning a gas mask, Wesley Dodds finds the killer. It's February 1940. The body of Jim Corrigan lies still. He rises from the dead, seeking vengeance. In March, chemist Rick Tyler will invent a pill that increases his strength tenfold. He begins trial testing on himself. It's November 1940, and we cut to a narration, to a voice speaking. I know we've been waiting for Superman, but if the Justice Society of America is going to work, I think we need him. Maybe his invitation got lost. I'm sure that isn't the case. Maybe he thinks he's too good for us, for the rest of us. And Green Lantern says, I agree. Superman's on the front page of the Daily Planet, of the Daily Star every morning. He's a busy guy. He was an inspiration to me when I first got my powers. They called me the Flash, by the way. I outrun bullets, even caught a few. Jay Garrick introduces himself, tipping his Mercury helmet on him. Then we get the guy, I'm trying to remember his name, say, we all read the papers, Flash. We know who everyone is. And I see you all staring. I might not look like much in person, but I was trained by old Joe Morgan himself. Ask me, we don't need Superman. We got Green Lantern in his magic ring. I hear it can do anything, he says, pointing a thumb to his chest. Green Lantern, Alan Scott goes ahead and chuckles and basically says, I'm not sure it can do anything, Adam, is it? Adam, is it? Though the ring and its lantern did save my life. Then we get someone in the back saying, okay, everyone, say cheese! No pictures yet, Johnny. I'm still working on my costume. The hood's not right, Our Man said. Let's give Superman some more time, Jay Garrick answered. I can find out where Superman is. I can summon a magic thunderbolt to tell us. See you! And sure enough, his genie arrives. Hiya, Johnny. What can I do for you? Find Super... And then it just stops right from when he's about to say that question. And then it cuts back to the scene where he's about to take the picture, but then it's like this. No pictures yet, Johnny. I'm still working on my costume. The hood's not right, Our Man said. I think it's important we capture this moment, Alan Scott responded, suddenly different from the event that happened. The entire team is here. It's November 1940. Green Lantern has never heard of Superman. No one has. Where is he? A voice speaks. It's April 18th, 1948. Dr. Manhattan arrives as Carver goes ahead and takes a drink of his coffee. Hello, Carver. There you are. How are you, John? Did you see my new dusk picture? Murder at Home? It was a real doozy. I don't have much interest in fiction. I can't thank you enough, John. Everything you've prophesied has happened. You've given me so much hope over the years. Have you heard of Superman? Superman? No. So tell me, John, what's in store for me this coming year? Dr. Manhattan has disappeared. John? And then it cuts to the Kent family home. This is where it always begins. It's 1956. Superman is seen in Metropolis for the first time. 25 years earlier, the winds change on a farm in Kansas. Dr. Manhattan arrives onto the scene. Jonathan and Martha Kent find the orphan boy. Great Scott! That's a space rocket! Land sakes! Then this child must be from another world. Oh, if only we had a baby of our own as sweet as he looks. And then this is what it said next. Carver Coleman never heard of Superman because an outside force shifted his arrival forward in time. The reverberations of this change affect not only this world, but every world in the multiverse. Superman is no longer first seen in 1938. It's 1956. Wait, no. It's October 1986. His arrival on Earth has shifted again. Oh my gosh, Pa? What is it? It's where you came from, son. His arrival changes again, and again. You will be free to move among the people of Earth. But never forget, although you look like one of them, you are not one of them. This isn't true! Clark, wait! It's not! Clark! Clark screams out in terror and pain and anger as he runs away, trying to grasp what he's just come to realize, as Dr. Manhattan stands in the background watching. Can't be! Clark! I don't want to be different! I want to be Clark Kent. I want to be your son. Clark, you are my son. Then Dr. Manhattan just turns his head to the side and says, I don't understand this universe. Yeah, this is where it starts to get Dan DiDio-ish. So then Superman is at the where his dad's about to pass away, and his father says, son, you did your best. Now listen to my last words. You must always use your superpowers to do good. Uphold law and order. Good luck, my son. And goodbye. Goodbye, Dad. It's May 1949. A young Clark Kent sits by his parents' bedside as they pass away. It's 1956. I watch Clark visit the graves of his parents. It's October 8, 1986. His parents are alive. Well, it took a while, Pa, but Pa and I finally came up with this. We made one for the front and one for the back. Years later, Jonathan Kent dies again in his son's arms. I begin to believe I misinterpreted what this universe actually is. I look to the future, following Superman's trail of influence. How can one man affect so much? Even 1,000 years from now, his hope is alive. After years of feeling isolated and alone, Clark Kent is approached by 3 teenagers from the future. They bring him forward to the 31st century. Welcome to the clubhouse, Cal. As the Legion of Superheroes, each one of us has come to Earth from our respective worlds to carry on your mission to combat xenophobia of all kinds. My mission? Yeah, we get that iconic scene where Superboy is with the Legion, and in that comic, in the cover, it's iconic because they reject him. But, yeah. And Clark then asks, my mission? Don't worry, Cal. The voting process is a formality. It's 2 against 1 anyway, Sandgirl says. I wasn't going to vote against him, Irma. I just don't like the way you're staring at him. I realize that this universe is much more than it appears, Dr. Manhattan mused, and it's all connected to him. Why is he the center of this universe? Forces such as the Antimatter and Extant have been responsible for the shifts in Superman's timeline. Dark directions seem to consciously target the hope he embodies in an effort to redefine him. I grow curious. And sure enough, Dr. Manhattan begins to make his move. He takes out Alan Scott by taking the lantern away, and starts to slowly but surely alter all of history. As others have done, I move to reshape this universe so that I must see how it forms around Superman. I change the past to challenge the future. And as I watch reality come crashing down, I realize that this universe is not part of the multiverse as others believe. The multiverse reacts to this universe. There have been endless parallel worlds, to none, to 52, the dark multiverses, all created by changes to this universe. The universe stands apart from the multiverse. It is the metaverse, and it is in a constant state of change. And as I remove the linchpin to the Justice Society of America, I change Superman once again. I watch as my take on this universe sharp shapens into reality. Superman is sent to Earth as a child. And then it cuts to Jonathan and Martha Kent. I lost our baby. Our last chance at a... What is that, Jonathan? It was like crying. I know how that sounds, but I know what I heard. Kind of looks like some kind of plane or space experiment. Johnny, it's a baby. On the eve of Clark Kent's high school prom, Jonathan and Martha are killed in a car accident. Without his parents or the Legion, Clark grows more distant from humanity. I understand him better. I relate to him more. It is 5 years ago, and I feel the power of changing Superman. It is intoxicating. And sure enough, we meet New 52 Superman. I've altered the metaverse, and in turn the multiverse. 1 year ago, the metaverse became aware of my hubris. And sure enough, we get a voice in the background screaming at him. I know what you did, Wally West screamed in pure anger and accusation. Whatever you did, they'll stop you. I realize that the metaverse is not passive, Manhattan mused. Like an organism fighting to survive, there are aspects of it I have underestimated. An innate hope that fights it back to the surface. And then we cut back to Carver. John, tell me what you see. It is April 18th, 1938. I have recreated the metaverse, and it has turned against me. I see a vision of Superman in the future. He has found me, and he destroys me, or I destroy the metaverse. John? John, are you okay? My God, what are you doing here? I do not know. It's June 8th, 1954. In 10 seconds, Carver Coleman will be dead. I know you never eat, John, but let me get you a drink. Why bring me into it? To frame me? To keep me busy while you cleaned up loose ends? One of which was me? Nathaniel questioned Joyce. John, where'd you go? Hello, is someone there? Or was it because you wanted me to stop you, Joyce? I love you, but not that much. And then suddenly a blunt instrument from the Academy Award strikes his head, just as the old movie The Enjoyment goes ahead and has the cop shoot him in the back. Go to hell, Nate! On June 8th, 1954, Carver Coleman is murdered. His mother and his associate ransack his home, taking what cash and valuables they can find. The housekeeper burns the letter protecting Carver's secret. The killing is never solved. It's May 1971. I have ended the war in Vietnam. I watch Blake shoot a woman with child and do nothing. It's April 1938. I use a man named Carver Coleman to help me find balance in the metaverse. 16 years later, I watch his mother bludgeon him to death in his home, and I do nothing. It is November 1st, 1985. Adrian kills millions to unite the world. On November 2nd, I allow Adrian to walk free. I am a being of inaction, on a collision course with a man of action. To this universe of hope, I have become the villain. And then Clark Kent's eyes snap open and we get the ending quote. Every action has its pleasures and its price. Socrates. And sure enough, we get bloody files regarding the letter, the script of the Adjournment movie from Werner Bros. Subtle. And then we cut more closer to midnight as the blood begins to start pooling onto the clock now. And thus ends Doomsday Clock issue number 10. And now, this is where it gets meta and also missed opportunities. You see, basically what Dr. Manhattan is a guy who's watching from the inside, looking inside from the out, because he basically experienced every retcon, every reboot, every crisis ever created throughout the entire DC history of his comics from 1938 all the way up to 2011 up to Flashpoint. He's experienced every single retcon in existence. He sees every alteration. He's seen the deaths of the multiverse. He's seen the deaths of the infinite worlds. He's seen the rebirth of them. He's seen the end of them. He's seen the return of it, the rise of the dark multiverses. He's experienced all these alterations in history, from like Crisis on Infinite Earths, Infinite Crisis, Identity Crisis, 0 Hour Crisis in Time, Final Crisis, and the idea, and now when he starts to alter it himself and the metaverse is fighting back, that's when it becomes more metatextual deconstruction, because what this basically is saying is that there is a more powerful force than him trying to fight him from his alterations, from his hubris to darken the universe. Where does that sound familiar? Does that not sound a little like Jeff Johns being the chief creative officer of DC once upon a time versus Dan DiDio, the president? That's what this is basically telling me. That Dr. Manhattan is Dan DiDio, and the metaverse is Jeff Johns and anyone else who believes that the DC universe should be filled with hope and optimism. That's basically what this is going on. This has basically turned Doomsday Clock not into just a sequel to Watchmen and an end to the Rebirth storyline, but is also this interwar within DC between Jeff Johns' vision and what the creators want versus Dan DiDio and what he personally wants for a DC universe. And then when it starts to mention how the dark multiverse and everything, that actually now makes Dark Knight's metal a little different to an extent, because really think about it, no one ever explains where it technically came from. For them, it's always been there. But when the rebirth happened and all this optimism and hope was returning to the DC universe, that darkness has to go somewhere. So I think in context, the rebirth storyline gave way to the dark multiverse as leftover residue of the darkness that Dan DiDio created, aka Dr. Manhattan. And like we get this homage to all of Superman's life, to all the history of the DC universe, though there are some issues that I had with it in terms of its narrative. Like Batman was also a member of the Justice Society in the pre-crisis of universe of DC. They don't bring up Batman at all in this. Like, he's just as an important character to Superman, but it's like Superman was the first. Everything begins and ends with Superman. And then you also got to... And then, like, they here's the other thing that really kind of annoyed me. He never explains why he got rid of Wally West. In fact, that leads to this question that kind of turns into somewhat of a plot hole for me. Is if he got rid of Jay Garrick, does that mean that Barry Allen should technically not exist? Because Wally West doesn't exist? Because when there was Jay Garrick, there was no Barry Allen. But because there was a Jay Garrick, there was a Barry Allen for the Silver Age. For the Bronze Age, I mean. So, where's that? Like, technically, Barry Allen shouldn't technically exist then, right? But anyways, yeah, so basically what Dr. Manhattan was explaining, that there was this all-powerful entity that is constantly changing the DC universe, aka the DC Comic Corporation itself, changing the DC universe with stories, with retcons, with reboots. Every single time it is affecting the multiverse, the infinite worlds, the 52 worlds, the dark multiverse, and it's turned the multiverse not into as like a stack, like basically a Jenga effect. If this goes, then everything else collapses. A domino effect. If you knock out one and they start to cascade all throughout. And that is what the interesting aspect is, because really when you think about it, that actually makes sense. Like, really think about it. All the crises that happen in the DC universe, all of them took place on the same universe and it's the same Earth. Crisis on Infinite Earths, Zero Hour, Crisis in Time, Identity Crisis, Heroes in Crisis, Infinite Crisis, Final Crisis, and now Doomsday Clock. So now it's like, yeah, and now it feels like this is a clash of ideals now. This is no longer a fight over who's stronger than the other. This is a battle of ideals and concepts. Like Wally West had said to Barry Allen at the end of Rebirth Special Number 1. There's going to be a war between love and hate and all these other metaphorical concepts. Which in turn makes it sound like this is more of a war between Jeff Johns and Dan DiDio regarding where the future DC goes. If Dan DiDio gets his way, the DC Universe goes back to the New 52 of the Dark Age, as everyone likes to refer to it as. But if Jeff Johns in his eyes gets his way, it will bring back the hope and optimism and have no Dan DiDio ruining everything. That's the thing I'm getting from this. And the other thing I was hoping for was the retcon of Heroes in Crisis to explain why Wally went nuts and accidentally killed everybody. Like, it was really kind of simple to explain it. Just have Dr. Manhattan manipulated Wally West's mind to become more paranoid than usual, and then lead to him having an overflowing of his power. Dr. Manhattan finds the right moment and presses a button, basically, and causes a blast effect that killed everyone there. But now we don't get that moment. Instead, we get Wally West in jail. I'll get to Heroes in Crisis issue number 9 when I can. I wanted to talk about something that was actually good first before I talk about something that will piss me off, no doubt. So yeah, the war for DC Comics is really happening behind the scenes. This is like remember how in Unbreakable, Elijah Prince, Elijah says, aka Mr. Glass, says that he feels like comics are like the modern interpretations of ancient battles between gods and people and angels and devils, like the Greek gods, and how people like to say that the superheroes nowadays are like the modern pantheons of the Greek gods. That's sort of what's going on here, where it's turned more into an ideal clash than a physical clash. Like, you have Jeff Johns basically writing what he's thinking, what is going through his head of an inner war within DC Comics publishing group between him, the creators, against Dan DiDio and his regime. And that really kind of gives this darker edge to things. Let's say if I'm proven right that what I'm saying is completely 100% correct, then people who already hate Dan DiDio are going to have more reasons to hate him because of how this happened, and because of what this is basically trying to tell you, and what Heroes in Crisis did. Like, Heroes in Crisis, in my opinion, was Dan DiDio's vision of storytelling. Tom King had a completely different idea about mental health awareness. Jeff Johns wrote Doomsday Clock, which is just as dark, but looks to be heading more towards a hopeful, optimistic ending if he gets his way. So really, once issue 12 rolls around, because there's going to be a 3-month delay on this for the issue 11, which sucks, and luckily it's going to happen on my birthday, so I'll have something to talk about on my birthday. That will decide the ultimate direction where DC goes. If Jeff Johns gets his way, we go back to hope and optimism. If Dan DiDio gets his way with issue 12, it's going back to the dark ages of DC Comics for people. And that's saying something, since you had Youngblood and Image Comics running around at the time. But yeah, this is a very fascinating delve into the Watchmen's character, Dr. Manhattan, exploring and exploiting the universe and all the changes that have happened, seeing it from the outside looking in. It's actually kind of a fascinating tale. And I was hoping at the end of the issue we would get a moment where Barry Allen, who was conscious, heard all this, and it was like, wait, you're the reason Wally was gone. You're the reason all this happened, and everything. And then charges at him to fight him, and then we cut to the quote, realizing that, and we get that quote. And I was like, man, you missed an opportunity there. Like, I want to see Barry Allen or Wally West confront Dr. Manhattan, because Doomsday Clock was the Flash's story to an extent, just as much as it is Superman and the Watchmen characters and the rest of the DC universe. So yeah, Doomsday Clock issue 10, we have finally learned the secrets of Rebirth and everything that has led up to this, and now we're getting a more metatextual context and everything about the war within DC Comics between Jeff Johns' vision in the future and Dan DiDio's vision of what DC should be. So yeah, it's going to be pretty fascinating what's going to happen till the end of this year. to see how Doomsday Clock all comes to an end. Do we get Hope in returning to the universe once more? Or do we get Dan Didio's way and everything goes back to the status quo of the New 52? You make the call. So yeah, those are my thoughts on Doomsday Clock issue number 10, Action, as it's called. This was Neo Reality on Tim. So if you like, comment, subscribe, and donate, stay tuned for more. And we now know who's pulling the strings.